Chapter 10, Bush Trade and Fan Customs, wherein the voyager, having fallen among the black traders, discourses on these men and their manners of life, and the difficulties and dangers attending the barter they carry on with the bush savages, and on some of the reasons that make this barter so beloved, and followed by both the black trader and the savage, to which is added an account of the manner of life of the Fan tribe, the strange form of coinage used by these people, their manner of hunting the elephants, working in iron, and such like things. And I read that, and I've deleted a whole ton of my reading here, and I realized, wow, I've gone very far in this chapter already, and because I'm doing it basically for myself, I am going to have to leave you, dear listeners, if there is any dear listeners there, behind, and go back to my final I'm gonna have to just kind of go back and start where I was going to start this. So yes, we do learn all that stuff. That is the description of chapter 10. And now I'm just going to continue on where I was going to continue on, because I know if I try and re-record everything I've recorded, I will lose this book. This book will be lost to me. So yeah, there's some interesting stuff. There wasn't any particularly striking nature passages, not like going through all the swamps. This is very much describing native people, which I find is the most cringy part of Mary Henrietta Manley. Kingsley, yes, but you might find that less so. If you do, that's just sort of use my little interjection there in my little interjection here. So let us continue. The fan basket work is strongly made, but very inferior to the fjord basket work. Their nets are, however, the finest I have ever seen. These are made mainly for catching small game, such as the beautiful little gazelles, nashiri, with dark gray skins on the upper part of the body, white underneath, and satin-like in sleekness all over. Their form is very dainty, the little legs being no thicker than a man's finger, the neck long and the head ornamented with little pointed horns and broad round ears. The nets are tied onto trees in two long lines, which converge to an acute angle, the bottom part of the net lying on the ground. Then a party of men and women, accompanied by their trained dogs, which have bells hung round their necks, beat the surrounding bushes, and the frightened small game rush into the nets and become entangled. The fiber from these nets the fiber from which these nets are made has a long staple and is exceedingly strong. I once saw a small bush cow caught in a set of them and unable to break through, and once a leopard. He, however, took his section of the net away with him, and a good deal of vegetation and sticks to boot. In addition to nets, this fiber is made into bags for carrying things in while in the bush, and into the water bottles already mentioned. The ironwork of the fans deserves especial notice for its excellence. The anvil is a big piece of iron, which is embedded firmly in the ground. Its upper surface is flat and pointed at both ends. The hammers are solid cones of iron, the upper parts of the cones prolonged so as to give a good grip, and the blows are given directly downwards, like the blows of a petzl. The bellows are of the usual African type, cut out of one piece of solid but soft wood, and at the upper end of these bellows there are two chambers hollowed out in the wood, and then covered with the skin of some animal, from which the hair has been removed. This is bound firmly round the rim of each chamber with tie, and the bags of it at the top is gathered up and bound to a small piece of stick to give a convenient handhold. The straight cylinder terminating in the nozzle has two channels burnt in it, which communicate with each of the chambers respectively, and halfway up the cylinder there are burnt from the outside into the air passages 3 series of holes, 1 series on the upper surface and a series at each side. This ingenious arrangement gives a constant current of air up from the nozzle when the bellows are worked by a man sitting behind them, and rapidly and alternately pulling up the skin cover over one chamber while depressing the other. In order to make the affair firm, it is lashed to pieces of stick stuck in the ground in a suitable way so as to keep the bellows at an angle with the nozzle directed towards the fire. As wooden bellows like this, if stuck into the fire, would soon be aflame, the nozzle is put into a cylinder made of clay. This cylinder is made sufficiently large at the end, into which the nozzle of the bellows goes, for the air to have full play round the latter. The fan bellows only differ from those of the other ironworking West Coast tribes in having the channels from the two chambers in one piece of wood all the way. His forge is the same as the other forges, a round cavity scooped in the ground. His fuel is also charcoal. His other smith's tool consists of a pointed piece of iron, which he works out the patterns he puts at the handle end of his swords, etc. I must now speak briefly on the most important article with which the fan deals, namely ivory. His method of collecting this are several, and many a wild story the handles of your table knives could tell you, if their ivory had passed through fan hands. For ivory is everywhere an evil thing before which the quest for gold sinks into a parlor game, and when its charms seized such a tribe as the fans, conclusions pass their careers. A very common way of collecting a tooth is to kill the person who owns one. Therefore, in order to prevent this catastrophe happening to you yourself when you have one, it is held advisable, unless you are a powerful person in your own village, to bury or sink the said tooth and say nothing about it until the trader comes into your district, or you get a chance of smuggling it quietly down to him. Some of these private ivories are kept for years and years before they reach the trader's hands, and quite a third of the ivory you see coming on board a vessel to go to Europe is dark from this keeping. Some teeth a lovely brown like a well-colored mirshkum, others quite black and gnawed by that strange little creature, much heard of and abused, yet little known in ivory parts, the ivory rat. Ivory, however, that is obtained by murder is private ivory. The public ivory trade among the fans is carried on in a way more in accordance with European ideas of legitimate trade. The greater part of this ivory is obtained from dead elephants. There are in this region certain places where the elephants are said to go to die. A locality in one district pointed out to me as such a place was a great swamp in the forest, a swamp that evidently was deep in the middle, for out from its dark waters no swamp plant or tree grew, and evidently its shores sloped suddenly, for the band of swamp plants round its edge was narrow. It is just possible that during the rainy season, when most of the surrounding country would be under water, elephants might stray into this natural trap and get drowned, and on the drying up of the waters be discovered, and the fact being known, be regularly sought for by the natives cognizant of this. I inquired carefully whether these places where the elephants came to die always had water in them, but they said no, and in one district spoke of a valley or round-shaped depression in among the mountains. But natives were naturally disinclined to take a stranger to these ivory mines, and a white person who was caught, as anyone who has been in touch must catch ivory fever, is naturally equally disinclined to give localities. A certain percentage of ivory collected by the fans is from live elephants, but I am bound to admit that their method of hunting elephants is disgracefully unsportsmanlike. A herd of elephants is discovered by rubber hunters or by depredations on plantations, and the whole village, men, women, children, babies, and dogs, turn out into the forest and stalk the monsters into a suitable ravine, taking care not to scare them. When they have gradually edged the elephants on into a suitable place, they fell trees and wreathe them very roughly together with bush rope all round an immense enclosure, still taking care not to scare the elephants into a rush. This fence is quite inadequate to stop any elephant in itself, but it is made effective by being smeared with certain things, the smell whereof the elephants detest so much that when they wander up to it, they turn back disgusted. I need hardly remark that this preparation is made by the witch doctors, and it constitutes a secret of theirs, and I was only able to find out some of them. Then poisoned plantains are placed within the enclosure, and the elephants eat these and grow drowsier and drowsier. If the water supply within the enclosure is a pool, it is poisoned, but if it is a running stream, this cannot be done. During this time, the crowd of men and women spend their days round the enclosure, ready to turn back any elephants who may attempt to break out, going to and fro to the village for their food. Their nights they spend in little bough shelters by the enclosure, watching more vigilantly than by day, as the elephants are more active at night, it being their usual feeding time. During the whole time, the witch doctor is hard at work making incantations and charms, with a view to finding out the proper time to attack the elephants. In my opinion, his decision fundamentally depends on his knowledge of the state of poisoning the animals are in, but his version is that he gets his information from the forest spirits. When, however, he has settled the day, the best hunters steal into the enclosure and take up safe positions in the trees, and the outer crowd set light to the ready-built fires and make the greatest uproar possible, and the fire upon the staggering, terrified elephants as they attempt to break out. The hunters in the trees fire down on them as they rush past, the fatal poison at the back of the skull being well exposed to them. The fatal point at the back of the skull being well exposed to them.